The Unusual Billionaires from Saurabh Mukherjea. Chapter 1. Searching for Greatness. Asian Paints on the Rajdhani Express. As I stood on the railway platform waiting for the Rajdhani Express to arrive, I was thinking about how lucky we had been to get to first class on this Premier Express train. It had been a long, hot day in the city of Kota for me and my colleague. We had come to Kota, a city in the middle of Rajasthan, to visit a few companies, and with the day's work done, we were now looking forward to a hot meal on the train followed by some sleep before our train pulled into Mumbai Central at 7:30 am in the following day. The Rajdhani Express arrived bang on time, and we clambered into its cool compartments. As we entered our first class compartment, I noticed an elderly gentleman sitting in the seat opposite to ours. I greeted him and his response betrayed an unmistakable Bengali accent. As dinner was being served, chapatis, paneer, dal, all steaming hot with chicken cutlets for carnivores like me, I struck up a conversation with my Bengali gentleman colleague. It turned out that he ran his consultancy services to the oil refining industries in India. The consultancy service was of a specialized kind. It was focused on helping oil refineries identify the correct coatings, paints, dyes for the oil tankers and oil storage tanks. So, which company's coatings, paints, and did he recommend? I asked. Asian Paints was the unhesitating reply. There is no one else in the same league as Asian Paints. In the industrial paints and dye segment, they are the unquestionable leaders and have been for most of my career. Why is Asian Paints the number one in industrial paints and dyes? Are they the cheapest? Do they have the best quality products? The industrial paints expert took his time to think about my question. He then said, I don't have an easy answer to your question. Asian paints and dyes are the most expensive in the market. They are also the best quality, but then other companies can also provide high quality products. In fact, if you or I wanted, we could manufacture industrial paints and dyes of the same quality, and yet we don't, and nobody else does. So I can't really tell you why Asian Paints is number one, but it is the I recommend to all of my clients. Soon the lights were dimmed in our compartment and we retired for the night. But as our train hammered through the Rajasthan countryside and then entered Gujarat in the early hours of the next day, I was intrigued by the veteran consultant's endorsement of Asian Paints as the number one company. What made Asian Paints so special? Why has nobody else been able to catch up with them? By the time we arrived Mumbai Central, I decided that my colleagues and I would devote a substantial amount of time and resources to answering these questions. To help you understand why I was so fixated on Asian Paints and why there are so few outstanding companies like Asian Paints India, it is worth defining greatness in the context of corporate life in India. Defining greatness. The ancient Romans were used to being defeated. Like the rulers of the most history's great empires, they could lose battle after battle but still win the war. An empire that cannot sustain a blow and remain standing is not really an empire. Yuval Noah Harari, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Many historians take the view that the greatness of a kingdom or an empire should be measured by its longevity. It's arguably the Persian Empire. Founded around 550 BC, it lasted for around 200 years until Alexander the Great brought it to an end in 330 BC by defeating King Darius III. However, if longevity is the measure of great empire, the Roman Empire is by some distance the greatest empire in the world has ever seen. While the first Roman Republic, headquartered in Rome, lasted from 100 BC to 400 AD, the imperial successor of the Republic lasted for staggering 1400 years before falling to Ottoman Turks in 1453. In sports, on the other hand, if you measure greatness using quantitative metrics such as averages, title counts, and win-loss ratios, sportsmen like Sachin Tendulkar and Michael Schumacher are far ahead of their peers in their respective sports over the past few decades. over the past few decades. In contrast, in cinema, if you measure greatness as being related to box office successes, actors like Amir Khan, Tom Cruise, Angelina Jolie, Harrison Ford have been the top grossing actors over multiple decades. In art, the works of Leonardo da Vinci sums in auctions held in different countries over decades. Thus, the rarity of individuals' achievements measured in crude commercial terms marks them out as great. Paradoxically, the great question, what is a great company, is harder to answer. A great company attracts the best talents, commands respect in the business community, and not trades at a premium in the stock market. However, there is no standard definition of greatness. As a Bengali gentleman mentioned during the dinner on the Rajdhani Express, there is no easy answer for what makes Asian Paints a great company. Moreover, as Phil Rosenwig points out in his insightful book, The Halo Effect, most of us end up viewing contemporary successful companies as great companies because of the positive press around them. We also do this because of the veneer of the success, the halo that surrounds them. It is the business community's analog to what is herd instinct in the stock market. Everyone else thinks the company is great, hence the company must be great. What then is a credible measure of greatness is that is not polluted by the halos around successful companies. The instinctive answer is market capitalization, or the number of outstanding shares of a company. The yardstick of market capitalization appears to be the most common measure of greatness. After all, if the stock market is rational, the share price is the best possible measure of the value of the company, and higher the value, greater the company. Take Apple Corporation for instance. Apple is seen as the universally loved company. Apple is seen as the universally loved company that gave us fantastic products like iPhone, iPod, and iPad. Brought back from near collapse by its iconic founder Steve Jobs, Apple's products generate billions of dollars of revenue and is the world's largest company by market capitalization. Similarly, in India, Tata Consultancy Service is India's largest company by market cap. TCS market capitalization went up to 4.8 lakh crore in 2015 from 0.6 lakh crore in 2004, implying a growth rate much higher than Sensex growth rate of 13.3% per annum over the same period, making TCS an enormous wealth creator for its investors. Surely, this achievement suggests that TCS is a great company. While there is no disputing TCS or Apple's stature measures companies' greatness based on stock prices change every day, whereas greatness is meant to be an enduring quality. More importantly, stock prices are an effect and not a cause of companies' greatness. Investors reward winning business strategies that help companies perform better than their rivals, not the other way around. It takes a long time for a company management team, its systems and protocols, and in the process deliver profits. Not many companies are able to sustain this over long periods of time. To use our example, Asian Paint's superior product quality is well known, but its massive network of dealers and distributors built assiduously over the years poses a huge barrier of entry. Tomorrow, if you or I, with backing from a deep-pocketed investor, decided to make the same quality of paints, we will find it next to impossible to compete with Asian Paints. So how do we quantify the greatness of firms like Asian? We compare such firms with each other using quantitative metrics which capture greatness. My research provides 2 pointers which help answer this question. First, over long periods of time, financial performance is the best reflection of a company's business strategy. Secondly, greatness does not change from one quarterly result to another. Think of an enduring brand, Apple, General Electric, Hindustan Unilever, Colgate. Chances are they have been around for decades and they have endured. Using these 2 pointers, I define greatness as the ability of a company to sustain superior financial performance over a long period of time. Such companies are rare. They can endure difficult economic conditions. Their growth is not beholden to domestic or global growth. They thrive in economic down cycles as well. Their management teams have strategies that deliver results better than their competitors. Over time, these companies learn from their mistake and increase the distance between themselves and their competitors. Often, such companies appear conservative. However, they do not confuse conservatism with complacency. These companies simply bide their time for making their right moves. These traits are common among great companies and rarely found outside great companies. Having defined greatness in intuitive terms, we can now begin the search for great Indian companies. Quantifying greatness. I now set the companies in financial terms. This is a three-step process. Step 1. Define companies. Given that it is hard to collect data on unlisted companies, my search for great Indian companies will have to stay restricted to listed companies, of which there are approximately 5,000 in India. Even within the listed universe, I will limit capitalization of 100 crores, as the reliability of data on companies smaller than this is somewhat suspect. There are around 1,500 listed companies in India with a market cap of 100 crore or above. Step 2. Define long periods. I believe a decade is long enough to measure a company's financial performance. A decade in India usually accommodates both the up and down cycles in the economy. For example, the decade from FY06, that is a financial year ending 31 March 2016, to FY15, that is a financial 15, coincides with 6 years of strong economic growth, FY06 to FY11, where the average nominal GDP growth was 15.7%, and 4 years of weak economic growth, where average nominal GDP was 12.8%. Hence, measuring fairly penalized cyclical companies, nor unfairly advantaged companies in more stable, steady sectors. Step 3. Define superior financial performance. At the very basic level, a company is doing well would mean that it is profitable and it is growing by successfully reinvesting its profits. Over very long periods of time, the twin filters of growth and profitability, in my view, are sufficient to assess the success of a franchise. Thus, my stock selection filters are companies that deliver growth of 10% and ROCE 15% every year for the past 10 years. Let's look at the filters in more detail. A. Why revenue growth of 10% every year? India's nominal GDP growth rate has averaged 14.5%, able to deliver sales growth of at least 14.5% per annum. However, very few listed companies, only 9 out of the approximate 1,500 firms on my screen, have managed to achieve this. Therefore, I reduce this filter rate modestly to 10%. That is, I look for companies that have delivered year for 10 consecutive years. While management teams have a natural desire for growth and scale, growth creates shareholder value only when returns on capital exceeds cost of capital. To put this simply, owners create value for shareholders only when capital they use in their business generate higher rate of return than the cost they are paying for using that capital. B. Why ROCE? Return on capital employed is defined as earnings before interest and tax capital employed, where capital employed is defined as the fixed asset used by businesses. Example, plant and machinery plus the working capital being used to finance the business. If this sounds too technical, there is another more intuitive way to understand ROCE. Over the long run, if a business produces 18% ROCE, that is a 18% return on the capital that is investing, then that is the annual return you are likely to get from holding that stock. A company uses capital to invest in assets, which in turn generate cash flows and earnings. This capital invested consists of equity and debt, and the sum of the cost of equity and cost of share in total capital is known popularly as the weighted average cost of capital. In other words, weighted average cost of capital WACC is the bare minimum cost that the owner pays for the capital required for running the business. Therefore, for the owner to create value for himself, the return on capital he is paying to use the capital, or WACC. Hence, when a promoter makes high ROCE that covers his business's WACC and leaves an extra for his shareholders, it is a good indication of the promoter investing his capital judiciously. In comparison, a bad businessman would not invest his capital judiciously. In comparison, a bad businessman would not even earn enough to pay his shareholders and lenders. Companies with low ROCEs keep requiring external infusions of capital to fund their growth. Therefore, this excess of ROCE over WACC is a measure of in the company. It follows, therefore, that if a company grows without excess returns, it creates no value for equity investors. In the Indian stock market, ROCE is the single biggest factor affecting a company's stock price. If I split India's listed companies into 4 equal groups ranked by their ROCE and ROCE, in the topmost 25% or top quartile have beaten BSE 200 by 7.7% per annum. Contrast this with the same top quartile for companies with high revenue growth. They have beaten BSE 200 by only 4% per annum. As you would expect, companies which delivered on both fronts, that is, a combination of top quartile ROCE and top quartile revenue growth, have performed even better on the stock price front. They have outperformed BSE 200 by an impressive 11.5% per annum. Why minimum ROCE of 15%? Minimum ROCE of 15%. The minimum return that one would rationally expect from equities is the risk-free return. That is what you would earn if you invested in the safest investment in India, namely the Government of India's bonds. In early 2016, the Government of India's 10-year bonds gave a return of, and that is the risk-free return in India. However, given that equities carry an element of risk that government bonds don't, an equity investor would want a premium return for this extra risk. This is the equity risk premium, the extra return an investor expects over and above the risk-free rate of investing. The equity risk premium in turn is calculated as 4%, the long-term US equity risk premium, plus 2.5% account of India's rating as per S&P. Hence, adding the risk-free rate of 8% and an equity risk premium of 6.5 to 7% gives a cost of capital around 15%. Note further that over the past 20 and 30 years, the Sensex has delivered returns of around 15% per annum, thus validating my point of view that 15% is a sensible measure of the cost of capital for an Indian company. Therefore, if a company is to be deemed great, it has to deliver an ROCE in excess of 15% per annum over a long period of time. It is worth noting that I am not looking for companies with the highest revenue growth or the highest ROCE. Standing levels of growth or ROCE at a specific point in time generally mean revert. That is, over long periods of time, their performance reverts to that of the average corporate. Hence, I base my selection on a system of guardrails. The first rail being revenue growth of at least 10% and the second one being minimum ROCE of 15%, which help us access which firms have what it takes to protect themselves and march ahead through good as well as bad times. As below demonstrate, Asian Paints is one of the few Indian companies able to stay within my guardrails. In fact, while 36 Indian companies have generated revenue growth of at least 10% per annum over FY6 to 15, and 1 or 2 companies have clocked ROCEs of at least 15% per annum over that period, a mere 18 companies have satisfied both criteria over this decadal period. Quantifying greatness, specifically for financial services firms. While the above filters apply to companies in the manufacturing sector, an important distinction needs to be made. FSI companies have neither revenues nor ROCE, since they borrow and lend money and earn interest and investment income on these operations. Hence, for BFSI companies, I use the following filters. A. ROE of 15%. I prefer return on equity over return on assets. For the uninitiated, equity is the value of an asset minus the total liability. I feel this is a fairer measure of the bank's ability to generate higher income efficiently on a given capital base, that is shareholder equity plus reserves and surplus over time. B. Loan growth of 15%. A bank whose loan growth is steady at 15% every year, despite the ups and downs of business cycles, will stand out from its competitors. In fact, these banks do better when the economy is in the doldrums. This is when a good bank's competitive advantages on all three aspects of loan, origination, appraisal, and collection, gets tested more comprehensively. Thus, during a down cycle, banks with weaker processes will suffer and cede market share to stronger banks. And risk assessment capabilities can up the ante by lending to sectors that are resilient. While 7 Indian lenders have generated loan book of growth of at least 15% per annum over FY6 to 15, and 13 lenders have clocked ROE of at least 15% per annum over that period, both criterion over the past decade. Enter the coffee can portfolio. In investing, as in auto racing, you don't have to win every lap of the race, but you absolutely do have to finish the race. While a driver must be prepared to take some risk, if he takes too many risks, he will wind up against the fence. There are sensible risks and there are risks that make no sense at all. Capital Group fund manager Robert Kirby quoted this in Charles D. Ellis' Capital, the story of long-term investment excellence. Robert Kirby was not only a senior fund manager for the Capital Group's companies, one of the world's largest, in excess of US $1.4 trillion. He was also a leading amateur race car driver. As exemplified by the quote above, his experience over investing and racing intervened to give him a very practical sense of risk management. Many investment professionals' risk model lack it. In the late 1960s, the Capital Group, then as of now headquartered in Los Angeles, set up an entity called Capital Guardian Trust Company, whose aim was to provide traditional investment counseling services to wealthy individuals. Kirby joined Capital in 1965 as the main investment manager in Capital Guardian Trust. Nearly 20 years later, he wrote a remarkable note which introduced to the world the concept of coffee can portfolio. Kirby, in a note written in 1984, narrated the incident involving his client's husband. Kirby in denominations of $5,000 each. But unlike Kirby, did not sell anything from portfolio. This process of buying when Kirby bought but not selling thereafter led to enormous wealth creation for the client over a period of about 10 years. The wealth creation was mainly on account of one position transforming to a jumbo holding worth over $800,000, which came from a zillion shares of Xerox. Impressed by this approach of buy and forget followed by this gentleman, Kirby coined the terms coffee can portfolio, in which the coffee can harkens back to the Wild West when Americans, before the widespread advent of banks, saved their valuables in a coffee can and kept it under a mattress. Although Kirby made the discovery of the CCP sound serendipitous, the central insight behind this construct: to get rich, an investor has to let a sensibly constructed portfolio stay untouched for a long period of time, is as powerful as it is profound. After all, the instinctive thing for a hardworking, intelligent investor is to try to optimize his portfolio every so often, usually once in a year. It is very hard for investors to leave a portfolio untouched for 10 years. A retail investor will be tempted to intervene whenever he sees stocks in the portfolio sag in price. A professional investor will feel that he has a fiduciary responsibility to intervene if parts of the portfolio are underperforming. But Kirby's counterintuitive insight is that an investor will make much more money if he leaves the portfolio untouched. 30 years after Kirby formalized the concept of CCP, the Silicon Valley based venture capitalist and founder of PayPal peaked 0 to 1. Why leaving a portfolio untouched for long makes investors very rich. Thiel begins by talking about the Pareto principle, conceptualized by Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, which says that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. In the investment management paradigm, what it essentially implies is that a very few companies in the portfolio attain exponentially greater value than all the others when held for a long duration. Thiel in his book highlights this principle using an example of the venture capital industry, wherein a fund typically invests in a portfolio of high potential early stage companies, expecting a few of them to hit exponential growth and increase the value of the fund multifold. The increase in the value takes place over a period of time, with the top 1 or 2 firms in the fund becoming more valuable than all others combined at the maturity. Fund typically have a 10-year lifespan. When I applied the CCP construct in the context of the Indian stock market, this is exactly what I found. To be more specific, I have found that a holding portfolio with a healthy mix of large, medium and small cap stocks with sound fundamentals for 10 years exhibits a similar stocks are responsible for the majority of the increase in the value of the portfolio. Those who are keen to delve further into why leaving a portfolio untouched is a seriously lucrative proposition should refer to Annexure 2. The coffee can portfolio comes to India. Having defined the parameters and criteria for measuring great companies comes to India. Having defined the parameters and criteria for measuring great companies, I can now screen listed companies. Specifically, I can now build CCP by screening on the base of data for the past 10 years, and then I can let that portfolio run for the next 10 years. For example, my first screening is for FY 1991 to FY 2000. I take the universe of listed stock with a market capitalization of more than 100 crore and look for companies that meet the parameters of revenue growth 10% and ROCE 15% every year for non-financial service companies, or loan book growth of 15% or 15% every year for financial service companies. Using 1991 to 2000 screen, there are 5 companies that meet these requirements. These are NIIT, Cipla, Hiromoto, Swaraj and Housing Development Finance Corporations or HDFC Limited. This gives us the coffee can portfolio of performance of the coffee can portfolio 2000 for the 10-year period 30 June 2000 to 30 June 2010. For this, I allowed an equal amount of money in each of these 5 stocks, say rupees 100. Thus, the value of my portfolio at the start of my analysis is rupees 500. I find that at the end of 10 years, the value of the portfolio has risen to rupees 2,923. This implies an annual return of 19.3% versus the 14% annum return given by the Sensex over the same period. Thus, the coffee can portfolio 2000 outperformed the Sensex by 5.3 percentage points. I repeat the above exercise for each year until the latest available financial year end, FY 2014 and 15. Given that each time bucket is 10 years, I have 6 fully completed coffee can portfolios: FY 1991 to 2000, 92 to 2000, 94 to 2003, 95 to 2004 and 96 to 2005. The CCP of companies beginning from FY06, that is coffee can portfolio 2006, will complete its 10 years of price period performance only in 30 June 2016. Similarly, coffee can portfolio 2017 and so on. Thus, I have 10 coffee can portfolios which are incomplete in the sense that they have not run yet for 10 years. For these uncompleted coffee can portfolios, I use cutoff date of 5 April 2016 for measuring price performance. The results are revealing and can be summarized in one sentence. Each of the 16 coffee can portfolios, 6 complete and 10 incomplete, in that they have not completed 10 years, has outperformed the benchmark large cap index in India, the Sensex. In fact, as can be seen in Exhibit 6 and 7, the outperformance of the coffee can portfolio to the Sensex is seen in Exhibit 6 and 7. The outperformance of the coffee can portfolio to the Sensex is almost always in excess of 4 percentage points per annum. For more details on the portfolio constituents and the comprehensive manner in which almost every iteration of the coffee can portfolio outperforms Sensex, please refer to Appendix 2. Primus inter pares in Latin means first among equals. It is typically used as an honorary title for those who are formally equal to other members of their group but are accorded unofficial respect, traditionally owing to their stature and respect they command in their peer group. Amongst Test cricketers, Rahul Dravid was the first among equals. As Edward Smith, the former who batted alongside Dravid in the county cricket matches, says, when Dravid walked into the dressing room of St. Lawrence Ground in Canterbury on a cold spring morning, you could tell he was different from all others. He did not swagger with cockiness or bristle with macho competitiveness. He went quietly around the room, shaking hand of every players, greeting It was not the mannered behavior of the seasoned overseas professional. It was a natural courtesy of a real gentleman. We met a special human being first, an international cricketer second. The cricketer was pretty good too. Dravid joined Kent for the 2000 season and I spent much of it at number 4, coming in one after Dravid. Not very often. That meant I had some wonderful opportunities to bat alongside a player who became the highest scoring number 3 of all time. I now look for the first among equals among the CCP stocks. The 16 to 2015 tells us two things. Firstly, in any given year, there are around 12 companies in the CCP. The smallest CCP was for 2000 with just 5 companies, while the largest CCP with 22 stocks was the portfolio which kicked off in 2012. Secondly, CCP has on average a churn of 26%. Every cycle, for every 10 companies in the CCP, 3 companies are replaced in the next cycle. Thus, very few companies actually manage to sustain their 10-year track record over the next 10 years. Therefore, we define those companies as first among equals which appear the most number of times in our CCPs. Repeating 10 years of revenue growth in our CCPs. Repeating 10 years of revenue growth of more than 10% and ROCE of more than 15% in multiple 10-year periods is not easy. So, if a company features repeatedly in the portfolios, by implication, the company is delivering the Test cricket equivalent of hitting double centuries repeatedly. To find corporate equivalent of Rahul Dravid among our coffee can portfolios, I search for those companies that have featured 4 or more times in the past 10 iteration, 2010 to 2050. Only 14 companies, include 5 from the financial sector domain, have featured in the CCPs 4 or more times. This and general services companies: Asian Paints, Astral Poly, Burger Paints, Cipla, Infosys, Ipca Labs, ITC, Marico and Page Industries, and 5 financial services companies: HDFC Bank, Axis Bank, Punjab National Bank and Dewan Housing. Of the 5 financial companies mentioned above, marked slide in the metrics over the past 3 years as the economic slowdown has bit deep on Indian economy. Punjab National Bank's ROE plummeted from 27% in FY10 to 10% in FY14 and 9% in FY15. Alongside this, public sector bank, whose loan book was growing at a brisk 20 to 30% until FY12, has seen a sharp drop in its loan book growth. In FY13, 14 and 15, this metric was well below 15% for PNB. HDFC's loan book growth has dropped from 23% in FY13 to barely 15% in FY15. 23% in FY13 to barely 15% in FY15. Dewan Housing's ROE has dropped from 22% in FY11 to barely 15% in FY15. Hence, I exclude these 3 lenders from the first amongst equal list. Of the 9 other companies mentioned above, 3 have shown a Cipla's ROCE has dropped rapidly from 24% in FY13 to marginally above 15% in FY15. This drop is in part driven by a halving in revenue growth from 23% in FY14 to 12% in FY15. Infosys sale growth went from 5% in FY10 to then dropped to 6% in FY15. IPCA's ROC halved from 28% in FY14 to 14% in FY15. This was in part driven by revenue shrinking by 4% in FY15 after healthy growth in the preceding years. Hence, I exclude these corporate two from our list. After excluding these 6 companies from my original list of 14 companies, I am left with 8 shown in Exhibit 8. These companies, the first among equals in India International, stand out their consistent, sustained long-term financial performance. These include 1. Asian Paints, 2. Astral Poly, 3. Berger Paints, 4. ITC, 5. Marico, 6. Page Industries, 7. HDFC Bank Limited, 8. Axis Bank Limited. These 8 companies have shown that it is possible to deliver sustained growth without compromising on long-term profitability. 8,500 largest listed companies in India failed to meet. The stories of these unusual companies are rich with learnings for the rest of us. Not only are these companies unusual in their demonstration of superior financial performance, they also stand out in their way they are managed and the extent to which they deepen their competitive moats and peel away from competition. The next 7 chapters delve deep into the multi-decadal evolution of these companies and how they have created sustainable competitive advantages. Those who want to understand more deeply the concept of sustainable competitive advantage should turn into Appendix 1. Chapter 9 synthesizes the learnings from my research on 8 great companies into easily digestible takeaways. Finally, Chapter 10 builds upon takeaways from great companies and turns into checklist for investors. For those who want to get their teeth into slightly more technical material, Appendix 2 gives detailed performance data on all CCPs since 2000 and also gives the latest CCP in Appendix 3. The case again is churning highlights why it makes sense to buy and hold the same